In today's lecture, I am going to discuss about the design philosophy of a steel members. The design philosophy is a set of assumptions and procedures which are used to meet the condition of serviceability, safety, economy, and functionality of the structure. Several design philosophies has been introduced from different parts of the world. Some of the design philosophies that has been used by engineers are working stress method, ultimate load method, and limit state method. The earliest one is working stress method. This was introduced in 20th century. This is based on linear elastic theory. Working stress method is used for design of reinforced concrete, steel and timber structures. The main assumption of the working stress method is that the behavior of the structural material is restricted within the elastic range. Thus, the allowable stress will come in a linear portion of stress strain curve. The method does not account the nonlinear behavior between stress and strain. The method is quite simple and reasonably reliable. As the working stress are low, the serviceability requirements are automatically satisfied. But when we consider the effect of creep, shrinkage, stress concentrations, and other secondary effects, the assumption of the material behavior in an elastic range will not hold. Method cannot account for the loads having counteracting effect such as dead load and wind load. It does not account the post yielding capacity of the structural members and also does not consider the redistribution of the forces and the moments in statically indeterminate structure. As a result, working stress method will lead to a large factor of safety and oversized sections, thus reducing the design economy. Method was used till 2007 in our country and IS 800 published in 1984 was the code through which we used to design the members. Working stress method is still being used in special structures such as water tank, chimneys, etc. in India. Elastic ranges hold good in serviceability checks such as crack width and deflection, etc. The shortcomings of working stress method lead to the development of ultimate load design. This is also known as load factor method or an ultimate load method. When applied to the steel structure, it is normally referred to as the plastic design method. In this, we make use of nonlinear region of the stress strain curves of the steel and concrete. The safety is ensured by introducing load factor. The ultimate load method makes it possible to consider the effects of different loads acting simultaneously and hence shortcomings of working stress method is overcome. In this case, the limit state is attained when the members reaches plastic moment strength and the structure will attain its mechanism. The safety measures of a structure is taken care of by appropriate choice of load factor. It is multiplied to the working load and it is checked with respect to the ultimate load corresponding to the member. As the ultimate strength of the member is considered, we will get much slender section for columns and beams compared to working stress method. But it is to be noted that satisfactory strength performance at ultimate load does not guarantee satisfactory serviceability performance at normal service load because of the large deflection and cracks in the sections. Plastic design does not permit using the limit state such as instability, fatigue, or brittle fracture. Limit state method. This philosophy is an advancement over the traditional design philosophies. It consists the safety of ultimate load and serviceability at the working load, a sort of extension of working stress method and ultimate load method. Limit state is the state of impending failure beyond which a structure ceases to perform its intended function satisfactorily in terms of either safety or serviceability. There are two types of limits. First, let's say ultimate limit state. It consists of loss of equilibrium, overturning, sway, fracture due to fatigue, brittle fracture, yielding, or buckling. Serviceability limit state. It consists deformation of or deflection, vibration, wind induced oscillation, corrosion and durability, ponding of structures. It means multiple safety factors for required safety and serviceability at ultimate load and working load respectively by considering all limits. They are called partial safety factor. Various partial safety factors for a material and load is discussed in our subsequent slides. This slide shows the partial safety factor for load. It is given in IS 800 published in 2007. The table number 4 is located on page number 29. This slide shows the partial safety factor of a material. It is tabulated in table number 5, page number 30 in IS 800 2007. In this slide, the partial safety factors for loads is summarized. At ultimate load, the partial safety factors for the summation of dead load and live load is 1.5. At ultimate load, the partial safety factors for the summation of dead load and earthquake load is 1.5 or zero point 0.9 times the dead load plus 1.5 times the earthquake load. Again in next combination, the summation of dead load, live load and earthquake load is multiplied by the partial safety factor of 1.2. The load factor 1.2 is considered for the combination of 3 because the probability of 3 loads reaching its peak together are less. Next, the partial safety factor used for serviceability limit is given. For the combination, that's a summation of dead load and live load, the partial safety factors for serviceability limit is 1.0. Again, for the summation of dead load earthquake load, the partial safety factors for the serviceability limit is 1.0. But for the summation of dead load, live load and earthquake load, the partial safety factors applied to dead load is 1.0, for live load is 0.8 and for earthquake is 0.8. The load factor is taken as 0.8 in 3 cases as the probability of the wind load or an earthquake load acting with a peak of live load is less. For all cases, the safety factors is taken as 1.0 as we are considering the serviceability limit of the structure here. First of all, let's try to understand the difference between member bending and member or a global buckling. Bending can be defined as the state of a stress. Buckling can be defined as the state of instability. For better understanding of bending, consider a simply supported beam subjected to a concentrated load at its midspan. Here we can say beam is loaded perpendicular to its longitudinal axis. With increase in load, beam deflects downward, and here top fiber will show increase in compressive stress and bottom fiber will show increase in tensile stress. Such deflection is identified as bending. Now let's understand the buckling. Consider a column subjected to an axial compression as shown in the figure. Here the load is acting parallel to the axis of the column. When the load on the column increases to its critical load carrying capacity, column will bulge out of the plane resulting into the state of instability. Summing the discussion, it could be concluded that bending is a state of stress and it occurs when the load is perpendicular to the longitudinal axis and it majorly occurs in a flexural member. Such type of failure can be identified as an ductile failure if the member shows large bending deformation before complete failure, while buckling is a state of instability and it occurs when loaded parallel to the longitudinal axis and it majorly occurs in the compression member. Such type of failure can be identified as brittle failure and should be avoided. In next portion of lecture, we will be covering a section classification which is something relatively simple, relatively straightforward. Most students don't struggle with the calculation, but I find lots of students struggling with understanding the concept, why they are doing it and how to apply. Let's take the unusual cross section. Let's say a channel section is welded onto a T section. Every element is having a different thickness, length and dimension. This is a nice matrix view shown along the member length. If we have to load the column either with an axial load or a moment here, it could cause a compression and tension in different parts of structure at different times. Just remember, compression causes buckling, tension stabilizes. If we apply a pure axial compression anywhere in the section, could develop buckling. And if we apply moment out of the whole section which is in compression could buckle. We need to check about the occurrence of the local buckling, and this way we can make a good distinction between a global buckling, which is when we load the column and entire column buckles from top to bottom, versus local buckling, which is for a thin element anywhere in a column section experience a failure. For instance, this flange element buckles out like that, and this is independent of the length whether the column section is of length 1 meter or 5 meter, and it is some way along the length buckles out. If we had a look at a cross section, I had drawn out the bottom flange. So we could have something which looks like this that way, and this is how it buckles. And then we can have the same thing with the web. Some way along the length, web will experience a local buckling. Say, for instance, a section of a web experience buckling, or this outer little flange could even experience a local buckling. Let's draw all of those on the cross section. So we could have the web experiencing the buckling, some sort of failure mode like this, and then goes out. Or top out, the top flange could buckle out like that. Or section here will experience a buckle out that way. Thus, are these are the localized effect somewhere along the length. Have a look at difference in the failure. In little out, little flange pops out away from its support. But if we take the adjacent section, we are having two supports marked by red circle. That is preventing from buckling as much, and now we have a bulge out of the section. Again, going to the web section, here we are having two supports marked by a red circle. That is preventing from buckling as much, and here also we will have a bulge out of the section. In the bottom flange pops out away from its support. So what you will find in the calculation, it makes a very clear distinction between the supported along one edge and supported along the two edge, because element supported along two edges is less likely to experience a local buckling. For our section, we need to classify all these different sections which is supported by different numbers of support. Let's understand above behavioral local buckling by some sort of graphical representation. Consider x-axis represents the slenderness and y-axis represents the failure stress. Let this be the failure stress curve of our column or beam as it gets longer. Here, graph represents the failure mode corresponding to the global buckling. So, initially, neglecting partial safety factors, it will buckle at Fy, the yield stress. And as the section gets longer, the section strength gets reduced as buckling comes into it. If we classify something and it is a class 3 section, what that means is that, for instance, this could be a stress at which local buckling occurs. So, class 3 section as shown in graph will never experience local buckling no matter how long or how short the section is. Global buckling will occur first. Then what about if it would be the class 4 buckling? It would be somewhere here as shown in the graph, and this is the stress at which the local buckling may occur. And we can see that on loading up the column, stresses gradually increases and it hits the failure stress line of class 4 section in initial portion of graph, representing that failure gets triggered by local buckling before global buckling triggers. Let's take slightly longer section somewhere along as shown in the graph. When we start loading this long column, stresses starts increasing and it hits global buckling graph and hence normal global buckling failure will occur first and it never actually reaches the stress at which local buckling will occur. Here we could conclude that for class 3 section or less will never experience a local buckling, while for class 4 section it could experience a local buckling. It doesn't mean it will, but it very well could. If it is a shorter section, one that is not likely to experience lots of global buckling as the failure stress is high, it probably will experience a local buckling in class 4 section. If it is a longer section, then it probably wouldn't experience a local buckling. Now we will go for differences of all classes of section in a tabular format. We will see the various parameters used for compressive resistance CR and moment resistance MR. Here, when compressive resistance is concerned, we need not to worry for class 1 and class 2 section and gross cross-sectional area is used to determine the compressive resistance CR and plastic sectional modulus is used to determine moment resistance MR. For class 3 section, gross cross-sectional area is used to determine the compressive resistance CR as we don't lose area due to local buckling and elastic sectional modulus ZE to determine the moment resistance MR. Here as outer fiber reaches the yield stress, we take it as failure. But class 4 section will have an effective area which could be less than or equals to the gross cross-sectional area based on the effect whether a local buckling triggers first or a global buckling triggers first. Let's say for an instant bottom flange fails in buckling which is very long. We start removing section from it. We will take away this section and will have a reduced cross section. To determine the moment resistance MR, effective sectional modulus will be less than or equal to the elastic sectional modulus ZE. Here we can say that the slender section will use the full amount and section then that are less slender or shorter beams may probably have a local buckling first. Let's put this on our graph for class 4 section. Say this point is at which the local buckling and global buckling curve coincide. So for the section on the right hand side, we use our full area of cross section or full elastic sectional modulus. On left hand side, then we have effective area less than gross cross sectional area and effective sectional modulus less than the elastic sectional modulus. Here we are supposed to reduce the cross-sectional area of the section. Reduction in area and calculation of reduced sectional modulus is quite laborsome process. Another way is to lower yield stress. Let's for an instant at 355 MPa given section is class 4. So now we will drop it to 283 MPa. Suddenly It is in class 3. Now, designing it as a grade 283 MPa, it is little easy to do calculation. Either of these methods can be done. Either you reduce your area and sectional modulus or you reduce the yield strength of the material. Today, we had gone through the understanding about various design philosophies such as working stress method, ultimate load method, limit state method. We had also gone for an partial safety factors for load and material. We had also developed the understanding of bending and buckling behavior of the member. And at last, we had a deep discussion of the section classification and its importance. Theory discussed in this lecture is quite tough and requires at least 5 to 6 times repeated and continuous hearing of lecture for better understanding. Again, toughest part of the lecture is the understanding of last slide of the presentation. It may happen even listening 5 to 6 times might not develop the concept. In my next lecture, I will cover this topic once more but in a elaborated form with relevant code clause. It is like a Bahubali series. Here I had put toughest part first, which serves as a Bahubali 1 series, where I had tried generating a number of doubts in your mind. My next lecture will serve as Bahubali 2, where you will get an answer to all your doubts. With this, I conclude my lecture. Thank you.